Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning into Black Spring with Autumn on this December 26, 2020. Again, I hope everybody enjoyed their Christmas Day celebrations, whether you're celebrating here domestically or if you're celebrating abroad. Also, if you're new here, I am equally excited to have you here. And I do believe that the chat box is open. So feel free to jump into the chat box, even if you just want to say hi or if you just have a few minutes or if you would make a comment. That's perfectly fine to do. As always, it's always nice to have your comments, and of course, you can like. If you like it, you can share, you can subscribe. Even if you don't like it, you can hit the like. I mean, you can share or subscribe, just to balance out the arguments, which there are many. So, with that said, I'd like to get started here with the topic at hand. So I'll go back. So every now and then you'll hear a spectrum of liberals when the question comes up, when was America great? It'll either be on some platform, or you may have seen it on another community, or you may have seen it, like on another, in passing, or you may have heard something like that. But I'm sure you've heard it by now, or you will hear it with the election season heating up. But I will say that some patriots might say, during the Civil War, when America lost over 600,000 soldiers, during the Civil War, when America lost over 600,000 soldiers, and of course, with one of the major conflicts being slavery, but unfortunately, the left has localized slavery for the U.S. and for the U.S. only at times. It seems that they've done that. They've been successful at that. The liberals have done that with their textbook writings. Some people aren't as privileged they don't have a full scope of American history. They don't have the facts. They have propaganda education. They have rewritten educational narratives. I will say, for one, that much of the stories of slavery and how slaves became slaves, those versions are so wide and broad that, it's not the same. It's not consistent. And then you don't have American history teachers or state history teachers stepping up to the plate and say, hey, let me dispel this for you. Let me clear this up for you. You don't have that. Unfortunately, you really don't. But today, I am kind of going at this from another perspective, but I'll continue. I want to say that, historically, we've had most civilizations, there was some form of servitude. Of course, you had the Roman Empire. You've had slaves in the South Pacific, and you've even got, modern day slavery in North Africa. Right now, Libya, which is, they've even referred to Libya as a failed state. Well, there's many conditions and many situations surrounding that and what happened to Libya, and I don't want to get into that because that's another show for another time. But we're definitely, some of the previous administration have been implicated in that failed state that Libya is being referred to as today, with the destruction of Gaddafi and the regime and those kinds of things. So I'll stay away from that. I'll get back to the subject at hand. But it seems that the citing of colonial legacies and the anti-imperialism, the white guilt is what's spreading like wildfire. It's even Europe. Europe has succumbed to the same thing. They ended up losing their values over this thing, white guilt, or they're going to be the superpowers of migration, or they're going to take on all the world's problems, which to me is just another part of another scheme that's related to an ultimate scheme, is a one world government and one everybody's under the same thumb, or turning the planet into a prison planet. You know, they're talking about saving the planet, which actually is going to be a bit of a conversion to more of a controlled situation in which a nation like the U.S. will become a socialist. Your wages will be reduced, your freedoms will be reduced, your values will disappear. You know, without, I don't remember who quoted this, but you don't have borders, you don't have a country. And, you know, everybody wants to claim there's a humanitarian backing or a humanitarian justification for, you know, everybody's responsible for the world's poor all of a sudden, you know, but historically there's always, we have never been able to predict equal outcomes. You know, some people are geographically placed in places that are not, you know, that have never been, you know, pliable rather for farming and, you know, water and irrigation, you know, successful. That's been, you know, since the beginning of time. I think those things are historically documented, but I'll go on. I will continue. I'll go back just a bit about citing the whole colonial kind of legacies, the white guilt, the anti-imperialism, the anti-capitalism. This is all coming from the left and the globalist agenda to demonize prosperity based on capitalism. The U.S., of course, is seeing historic numbers in the workforce, unemployment for minorities, blacks, Hispanics, women, all of the groupings that the left champions. You know, they've yet to give President Trump any credit for anything. They claim they're for equal this and that, but they can never say one thing, because, you know, they've got to be, at this point, they've got to make everybody's got to be miserable. The ideology is an ideology that I've mentioned in previous videos. It's very much the nihilist and the critical theory, where they are just deconstructing everything, but they're deconstructing everything to fit their narrative in terms of why we should be subsidizing the whole world. I don't believe that America should subsidize the whole world. Unfortunately, I think we were put in this situation a long time ago. FDR, in fact, coined the name the United Nations. I think maybe it was in around 40. It was post-World War, along with the Allies, NATO. All of these organizations were formed post-World War. So the war now. So in a way, America is already subsidizing. Even after these countries saw prosperity, we were still subsidizing. I say, oh, well, if we do one thing, it's going to make everybody better. Well, what is that ideology? If the United States subsidizes the whole world, Europe, everyone, is it making us safer? Well, I tell you, the European countries have no problems biting the hand that freed them. They have no problem doing that. We bear the brunt. I mean, there's a quote, you know, the white man's burden. You know, you end up we pick up the tab for everyone, but yet we're taking the criticism, and we take the burden, the financial burden. And it's a burden that's not going, it's a perpetual burden. So I'm going to keep going here. So I'll go back to this. It's a bit of a sociology, kind of a psychology perspective that I'm in right now, and then talk about the whole Marxist kind of thing and the nihilist ideologies. The Frankfurt School is during the 60s, the student movement, all these things basically started to kind of corrupt. You know, they could not create conflict in a working class sense, so they decided to deconstruct in another way. They decided to deconstruct race. They started to deconstruct by gender. They started to deconstruct by, and then now we can say they've imported age discrimination. They've just deconstructed so much. This spectrum of Nihilism is just so wide and so broad right now that it could go anywhere. And I'm not even sure if there's a way to pull it back, because it's spreading to the youth. And that's the biggest, that's where the dam needs to be plugged. You have to, I guess that's why many people say, we need to take back the schools. Well, hey, we've got leftists that don't even want, they don't want to let go of the grip that they have. They don't want to let go of having control over the schools. They want, in fact, I think Kamala Harris mentioned and extending the school to 12 hours a day. What do you think that's for? It's so I here again, I'll get back on. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but here again. So today I'm offering a bit of a counter argument to, when people say, oh, when was America great? To me, you can't do that without maybe looking at history and looking at economics. And I think that's the part that the left is staying away from right now as we're approaching 2020. They're not talking about the economy. In fact, they want to talk about, they threw the caveat in earlier about a recession. Oh, there's a recession coming. The recession's coming. Oh, it's coming. It's coming. It's time for a recession. But we haven't seen that. You even have people that are still offering that the Obama administration is responsible for the trends. Well, he must have had a trend that was a battery. He must have inserted an extra battery of trend, every 4-year trend kind of battery, because it doesn't work that way. He can't be credited with that. I would say, I think it's because of the economic approach that President Trump has applied. And I think President Reagan maybe had similar regime in terms of, the tax cuts, how it, and hands off and deregulation. I think those are similar to President Reagan's economic plans, or some of his policies in past times. So I just want to say, and then for one, the first thing I want to offer is that if we look back in history, we can look at the 19th century, where we had on January 1st, 1835, Andrew Jackson paid off the U.S. debt. And it's said that he was the first and the only president that actually paid off the U.S. debt. And then, in fact, I think that President Trump, at the beginning of his campaign, that is his goal. I mean, can anybody imagine what we would be like? What the dynamics, the financial dynamics would be if we didn't have, what kind of feat that would be for the U.S. taxpayer and the economy, and for President Trump himself. I think he, as much as they want to say he inserts himself into, well, no, he's inserting we the people. He's always stood behind giving the country back to we the people. That is what he's been inserting. Does anybody actually believe that he actually needed this job? I mean, he had a life prior to this. And when the liberals come in with all of their opinions and their emotions, and they speak them as if they're fact, or that he just needed a new scheme, or he just needed to prey on, America to get his ego stroked. No, he didn't. That's not that. I would say that is not true. I would say no, it's not. He did say he's always been about giving the country back to the people. And I think that's the exact antithesis of what the left wants to do. They want to keep their hand on the American people and on the American taxpayers' dollars. So I'll keep going here. But I want to show you something very specific here. So if you will look with me, I just want to show you a couple of things. Here in reference to I want to show you a couple of things in reference to what we're looking at here. We're going to look at a couple of trends, some comparative kind of trends when it comes to spending and what we've had. I mean, I did mention President Jackson, I did. But of course, we've had some things, we've had some different things to, of course, we've had different presidents, of course, since then, but let's see. I'll at least give you, this is marketwatch.com. I will give you some specifics on that in just a second here. A little bit of a function here. Okay, so what we have, what we're discussing specifically, I'm just quoting this. This was an article written back in 2018, that's October 29th, how much each U.S. president has contributed to the national debt. And this was written by Sean Langlois. Yes, so according to this particular author, I'm going to paraphrase and I'll give you the quotes. Donald Trump claimed on the campaign trail that as president he would completely eliminate the then $19 trillion in national debt. Then it goes on to say, let's just say he's not exactly on track. Since he made that promise in early 2016, the debt has ballooned to a $21.7 trillion, and his tax cuts are expected to drive that number higher. So it's just, words matter. Expected. Okay, but before you jump on the Trump bashing bandwagon, it might be helpful to see how we got into this debt-riddled position. The cost estimating website HowMuch.net crunched numbers from the U.S. Treasury as well as the various data points uncovered by the balance to come up with this colorful and very telling history of America's debt problem. Okay, so then the question is, it goes back to how much the U.S. debt grew under each president. Okay, so we will start. So with the current president, Donald Trump, 2018, it's showing us 2018 through 2021. It's showing $4.78 trillion. Okay, and then that's at the top block. That's the top block. And then, of course, we go to the previous administration where Barack Obama from 2010 to 2017 shows $8.59 trillion in debt. I'll give you more numbers. George W. Bush from 2002 to 2009, $5.8 trillion. And then we go over to Bill Clinton from 94 to 2001, $1.40 trillion. And then we have George H.W. Bush, 1990 to 1993, $1.55 trillion. And then we had Ronald Reagan, 1982 to 1989, $1.86 trillion. So I'm just going to stay in that window for just a second. So, I mean, I can let you see this. This is a pretty interesting graph. I mean, it goes all the way down to 1789 through 1913, which is, I do believe, when the actual gold, the backing of the U.S. dollar went away. 1789, 1913, and then you go, of course, you go into Woodrow Wilson, 1914, 1921. It's at $21 billion. So it shows a pretty big span. But I'm just thinking to myself, it would be great that with all the tariffs and everything that the president has imposed, I'm hearing that much of that money is actually going into the U.S. Treasury, because if you're not familiar, or whatever your generation is, you would know that, you might know already that the U.S. dollar, we had our own money. The U.S. Treasury issued our money. And at that time it was backed by gold. Okay. And right now, what do you see on the dollar? You see the Federal Reserve as the issuer of the dollar. In fact, I'm told that that actual backing, that actual is an international monetary fund, and it's not even located on American soil. So, if you just look at it from that perspective, if we eliminated some of these foreign entanglements, these elongated foreign entanglements, the foreign aids, and the global the global support, and all these the facilitations of, you even have John Kerry. I did this in an earlier video about John Kerry is organizing for this whole climate change. I do believe that this climate change issue is not going to go away. In fact, another issue I did, the Democrats are going to run the same organization that recruited AOC. They're recruiting more radical Democrats candidates to actually run for Democrat office. There's at least 4 offices that I found in which they've got specific candidates. They're trying to run people that are going to drive more support and do more backhand deals, I would imagine, for this whole climate change. Is basically, to me, it's a global tax. I mean, of course, I've seen the headlines that the UN is saying, "Oh, well, the U.S. can't get away without paying for, the poor." And so I'm just thinking, it's just becoming. I do believe that President Trump was right on when he said, that these organizations, not only are they obsolete, it's just that they are like ticks. They are sucking off of the U.S. taxpayer dollar. And we've been duped. We've been subsidizing these countries for so many years that we're realizing that we've been duped in one way or another. Which the money that they're saying is in foreign aid is actually just being kicked back to the Democrats, and they're lining their pockets. Most of these Democrats are worth millions of dollars. And look at their constituents. I mean, I look in Southern California, Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff. All these districts are disgusting. We have tent cities. We have homelessness everywhere. We have new tent cities going up every day. You might see one tent tomorrow, and then by the end of the week, you might have 10 people on that side, joining them on that sidewalk. You can barely walk downtown in certain Southern California cities. You can hardly attend anything, because it's totally just, it's bombarded, it's layered with homelessness throughout. Not to mention the grade level. Many of the kids don't read grade level because the schools are so inadequate. So I really don't know what the state of California is doing with all of the taxes all the tax money that they get. The tax money that they get for the extra gas tax, the extra environmental taxes. We're just tax out the wazoo. And we don't even have decent roads. Recently, I remember listening to a YouTuber that was saying that a disabled guy was in a wheelchair. The disabled guy ended up falling out of his wheelchair because the road was so corroded, or just so broken down, that part of his wheelchair just sunk into some of this damaged road. So that was a bit of a difficult thing to hear, that people are struggling in that way, and the governor is just coming up with more ways to facilitate illegal immigration and border crossings. So, yeah, so I'm sorry, I digress. I'll get back to where I was. But I was just thinking, like many people that don't, they ask these questions about when was America great. Well, it's not a one dimension answer there. And it can't be based on emotions or propaganda education. We need to go with the facts. We need to go with what we know. And the conspiracy theories, and it's really useless at this point. And most of the time, I would imagine if you ask a teacher, if we go into this whole white guilt thing, can you explain how Can you explain to the students that happen to be black or whatever they want to refer to themselves as African American? Can you explain to them how a group of white men could round up millions of people and bring them back to the States? I always took, somebody else mentioned that on another video, and I was just thinking, yeah, I kind of thought about that too, because, I've never been to Africa, but I would imagine that, you know, that they're pretty avid hunters and they can pretty well defend themselves. So even with a few shotguns, they still would have an army of people that are familiar with that. They're familiar with their own homeland, and they wouldn't be, invaded. An invasion. This is suggesting to me that an invasion occurred, that they were overtaken, that they were. But I just don't believe that it happened that way. And there is the Atlantic slave trade documentation that's out there. But here again, the left and the liberals have localized slavery to fit their narrative that white people are the problem. They don't get things by working hard, or we can predict all outcomes for people that are not minorities, and they call that white privilege. So it's pretty disgusting. But I think if people just start thinking, and if you don't have any thoughts, open yourself to others' thoughts, and then and I'm sure you'll keep, it'll be a perpetual thing. You'll start to pick up other narratives and other perspectives, and you won't be so gullible. So here again, I'm just thinking, I'm going to go back to, I went off on a tangent again, but my original statement was, where I was going with this was that, can you imagine what kind of a feat that the U.S. would have if we could eliminate the U.S. public, the American debt? If we could, I tell you what it would mean. I think it would mean smaller government. Could it mean the end of the IRS? I would imagine that, Democrats' heads would pop off if they don't have those agencies. If they've got if the government overreach is going to be reduced, they can't have that happen, because that's their whole thing. And then their whole narrative is, it doesn't support the Constitution. It doesn't support the principles. It doesn't support fiscal responsibility. It's just, they're all over the place, and that's the way they like it. And then just one other tidbit I just wanted to say, Europe is pretty aggravated right now because President Trump pulled us out of the Paris Agreement, and that was on November 4th of 2019. So you can go into un.org and see where the document was brought, where some type of agreement came up, or some type of, maybe the President Obama signed off on some level, agreed to this Paris Agreement, but then it shows on November 4th that the United States, the Secretary of General, it was to withdraw from this Paris Agreement. So there again, that's another entanglement, which I think will pretty much crash the U.S. economy. And I think that's another angle that they're going to try to use. They would rather, quick, hurry, let's get everybody, before everybody has a job, we've got to ruin things, and we got to sabotage, this election. And, I really feel for the president, because I'm just thinking, my gosh, he is just dealing with such a huge spectrum of opposition. It's the depth of opposition that he's dealing with. Gosh, he can't have eyes everywhere. But, I don't think that they actually they don't care about America. They don't care about the sustainability. They don't care about our values surviving. They just want what they want, between power and one party representation, one party state, blue state. So that's a bit of my argument. That's what I'm offering for today. So if you've joined me here, I really appreciate it, as always. And if you could subscribe, share, of course, consider those things is what I'm asking when I say that. That would be great. And also let me know what you think about when was America great. And then there's, I'm sure it could be, you can find many ways to get to your answer, and have, some factual things to support that. But I just think economically, when one group of people, when the weakest group of people do well in the U.S., then America is great overall. So I think it's a build up on, in terms of greatness. Greatness is built on an actual foundation, and if it's solid economically, there'll be more consistency and more for everyone. Another example I would cite would be like the Industrial Revolution. I think that's another point in which the country was great. Um, the economics, we had the resources, we had the materials, the steel, and that's why I think President Trump is bringing a lot of things full circle. A lot of things that people might want to call, even industrial relics, or of course, President Obama was, quoted as saying that, you don't have a magic wand, you never. Of course, he's trying to sabotage, subvert everything. So that's. But yeah, of course, please let me know what you think in the comments, and I appreciate your feedback as always. And I am trying to improve my presentations here, and hopefully we can all grow together. So until next time, I will see you again for Black Spring with Autumn.